So welcome. The Senate Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions will please come to order. This morning we'll have a hearing on fixing No Child Left Behind testing and accountability. There's a lot of interest in this hearing. We've heard from people around the country ever since last week when we put a draft working paper up on the website. We have a lot of people in the hall. I would say to those in the hall who are not able to get in the room, we have an overflow room, which is room 538, so you'll be able to listen to all of the proceedings. So if someone would let those outside know that, why, then they'll have a chance to hear the witness testimony and the questions. And we welcome them, and we welcome everyone who is here. Ranking Member Murray and I will each have an opening statement, then we'll introduce our panel of witnesses, then we'll have a round of questions. We'll ask our witnesses to summarize their testimony, please, in 5 minutes each, because the senators will have lots of questions. I'll call on the senators in order of seniority at the time the gavel went down and who were here, and then after that they'll go on the order of first come, first serve. We will conclude the hearing at noon. Or before if we get through earlier. And my opening remarks are going to take a little longer than normal since this is the first meeting of the committee in this Congress, but I'll promise my colleagues I won't make a habit of that, and I'll keep my questions to the same 5 minutes that everyone else has. First, some preliminary remarks about the committee itself. This committee touches almost every American. No committee is more ideologically diverse, and none is more productive than this committee. In the last Congress, 25 bills that came through this committee were signed by the President and became law, some very important. That's because Chairman Harkin and I worked to find areas of agreement. I look forward to working in the same way with Senator Murray. She is direct. She's very well respected by her colleagues on both sides of the aisle. She cares about people. She's a member of the Democratic leadership. She's result-oriented, so I look forward to that working relationship. We're going to have an open process, which means for me, every senator, regardless of their party affiliation, will have a chance to participate, a full opportunity for discussion and amendment, not just in committee, but on the floor. I mean, when our bills in the last two Congress never got brought up on the floor, but this year we want a result, and that means go to the floor. That means further amendments, further discussion. That means 60 votes to get off the floor, so it will be a bipartisan bill. If it goes to conference, we know the President will be involved. We want his signature on our bill. So all the way through, we're going to do our best to have input from everyone so we can get a result. Now the schedule. The schedule of the committee generally will start with unfinished business. First, fixing No Child Left Behind. This is way overdue. It expired more than 7 years ago. We posted a working draft last week on the website. We're getting a lot of feedback. Staffs are meeting, exchanging ideas. We'll have more weeks of hearings and meetings. But we've been working on this 6 years. We've had 24 hearings over the last 3 Congresses on K through 12 or fixing No Child Left Behind. And almost all the members of the committee this year were members last year. So we hope to finish our work by the end of February and have it on the floor. I would say to my colleagues it's important to do that so we can get floor time. It'll take a couple of weeks. No Child Left Behind took 6 or 7 weeks when it was passed in 2001, and we'd like to have a full opportunity for debate and amendment. Second, reauthorizing higher education. We've already done a lot of work on that in the last Congress. This is, for me, about deregulating higher education, making rules simpler and more effective. For example, the student aid loan form, so more students can go to college. We can finish the work that we started in 2013 on student loans. We can look at accreditation, and we can look at deregulation. The task force that Senator Mikulski and Burr and Bennett and I have formed on deregulation will be the subject of our hearing on February 24th. As rapidly and responsibly as we can, we want to repair the damage of Obamacare and provide more Americans with health insurance that fits their budgets. Now, on this issue, we don't agree on party lines, but our first hearing is on a bipartisan bill the 30-40-hour work week. Senators Collins and Murkowski and Manchin and Donnelly have offered that. We'll have a hearing tomorrow on that, and we'll report our findings to the Finance Committee. Then some new business. Let's call it 21st century cures. That's what the House calls it, as it finishes its work this spring on that issue. The President talked about it last night. He's also interested. I've talked with him about it. In fact, he's interested in all three of these subjects that we talked about: fixing No Child Left Behind, finishing our work on higher education, and 21st century cures. I like that because I like to find those areas of agreement, and we hope we can have a legislative proposal that he will be glad to sign. What we're talking about here is getting more medicines, devices, and treatments through the Federal Food and Drug Administration more rapidly to help millions of Americans. Now, there will be more on labor, pensions, education, and health. These are major priorities, and that's how we will start. One other thing, the President's made major proposals on community colleges and on early childhood education. These are certainly related to elementary and secondary education, but we've always handled them separately. We can deal with the community college proposal as we deal with higher education. We'll have to talk about how we deal with early childhood education, because to do that in any kind of comprehensive way involves getting into Head Start and into the Child Care Development Block Grant that we dealt with in the last Congress. Now to today's hearing. And I said, more of our colleagues are here today, I said I would not be as long in my opening statement in future meetings, but this is the first one. Last week, Secretary Duncan called for the law to be fixed. No Child Left Behind. Almost everyone now seems to agree with him. It's more than 7 years overdue. We've been working on it more than 6 years. When we started working on it, and we did this, Republicans and Democrats, Secretary Duncan, 6 years ago, former Representative George Miller said, let's identify the problems, let's pass a lean bill and fix No Child Left Behind. Since then, we've had 24 hearings on K through 12 or fixing No Child Left Behind. In each of the last two Congresses, we've reported bills out of the committee. I would say to my colleagues that Congress before last, it was mainly what one might call a Democratic bill, but I, Senator Enzi, Senator Kirk all voted for it so we could get it to the floor and continue to amend it. 20 of the 22 of us on this committee were members in the last Congress when we reported the bill. 16 of the 22 of us who are members of this committee were in the previous Congress when we reported a bill, so we ought to know the issues pretty well. One reason No Child Left Behind needs to be fixed is it's become unworkable. Under its original provisions, almost all of America's 100,000 public schools would be labeled a failing school. To avoid this unintended result, the U.S. Education Secretary has granted waivers from the law's provisions to 43 states, including Washington, which has since had its waiver revoked, as well as the District of Columbia and Puerto Rico. This has created a second unintended result, at least unintended by Congress, which has stated in law that no federal official should, quote, exercise any direction, supervision, or control over curriculum, program, instruction, or administration of any educational program. That's the law today. Nevertheless, in exchange for the waivers, the Secretary has told states what their academic standards should be, how states should measure the progress of students toward those standards, what constitutes failure for schools, and what the consequences of failure are, and how to fix low-performing schools, and how to evaluate teachers. The department has, in effect, become a national school board. Or as one teacher told me, it has become a national human resources department for 100,000 public schools. At the center of the debate about how to fix No Child Left Behind is what to do about the federal requirement that states each year administer 17 standardized tests with high state consequences. Educators call this an accountability system. Are there too many tests? Are they the right tests? Are the stakes for failing them too high? What should Washington, D.C. have to do with all of this? Many states and school districts require schools to administer additional tests. Now, this is called a hearing for a reason. I've come to listen. Our working draft includes two options on testing. Option one gives flexibility to states to decide what to do about testing. Option 2 maintains current law regarding testing. Both options would continue to require annual reporting of student achievement disaggregated by subgroups of children. Washington sometimes forgets, but governors never do, that the federal government has limited involvement in elementary and secondary education, contributing 10% of the bill. For 30 years, the real action has been in the states. I've seen this firsthand. And you'll forgive me for pointing it out. I was governor in 1983 when President Reagan's education secretary issued a nation at risk, saying, quote, if an unfriendly foreign power had attempted to impose on America the mediocre educational performance that exists today, we might as well have viewed it as an act of war. Then the next year, Tennessee, after a long battle with the National Education Association, became the first state to pay teachers more for teaching well. Then the next 2 years, 85 and 86, every governor spent the entire year focusing on education. First time that ever happened in the National Governors Association. I was chairman of it then. Bill Clinton was the vice chairman. In '89, the first President Bush convened a meeting of governors in Charlottesville and established voluntary national education goals. Then in '91 and '2, President Bush announced America 2000 to move the nation voluntarily toward those goals, state by state, community by community. I was the education secretary then. Since then, states have worked together voluntarily to develop academic standards, develop tests, to create their own accountability systems, find fair ways to evaluate teacher performance, and have then adopted those that fit their states. I know members of this committee must be tired of me talking until I am blue in the face about a national school board. I know that it is tempting to try to fix classrooms from Washington. I also hear from governors and school superintendents who say this: if Washington doesn't make us do it, the teachers union and opponents from the right will make it impossible for us to have higher standards and better teachers. And I understand there can be short-term gains from Washington's orders, but my experience is that long-term success can't come that way. In fact, Washington's involvement in effect, mandating Common Core and certain types of teacher evaluation, is creating a backlash, making it harder for states to set higher standards and evaluate teaching. As one former Democratic governor told me recently, we were doing pretty well until Washington got involved, and if they'll get out of the way, we'll get back on track. So rather than turn blue in the face one more time in front of my colleagues, let me conclude with the remarks of Carol Burris, New York's High School Principal of the Year. She responded last week to our committee draft in the following way, and I quote her: I ask that your committee remember that the American public school system was built on the belief that local communities cherish their children and have the right and responsibility within sensible limits to determine how they are schooled. While the federal government has a very special role in ensuring that our students do not experience discrimination based on who they are or what their disability might be, Congress is not a national school board. Although our locally elected school boards may not be perfect, they represent one of the purest forms of democracy that we have. Bad ideas in the small do damage in the small and are easily corrected. Bad ideas at the federal level result in massive failure and are harder to fix. This is Carol Burris, New York's High School Principal of the Year. She concludes with this: please understand that I do not dismiss the need to hold schools accountable. The use and disaggregation of data has been an important tool that I use regularly as a principal to improve my own school. However, the unintended negative consequences that have arisen from mandated annual testing and its high-stake uses have proven testing not only to be an ineffective tool, but a destructive one as well. Senator Murray.